It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from Washington, D.C. is my colleague, Nick Harper. Hi, Nick.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 4 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll get all the latest from the UN headquarters in New York as the leaders of the US and Ukraine prepare to address the UN General Assembly. And we'll hear from our correspondent in Ukraine itself following the latest Russian attack. But first, the headlines. UN Chief Antonio Guterres calls for reform of the United Nations Security Council at the 78th UN General Assembly session. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky's address slated later today.
It is high time to renew multilateral institutions based on 21st century economic and political realities rooted in equity, solidarity and universality.
India-Canada relations hit new low. India expels a Canadian diplomat after concerns over anti-India activities. Women's reservation bill tabled in the special session of Indian Parliament, calling it historic. Prime Minister Narendra Modi urges opposition to unanimously pass the bill. So let's go to the heart of action in New York. The high-level general debate of the 78th United Nations General Assembly session has officially begun in New York. Over 140 leaders and state representatives from around the world are expected to participate in the debate. As customary, Brazil's leader was the first national figurehead to address the hall. His speech will be followed by US President Joe Biden's address. The debate will conclude on September the 26th. Meanwhile, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, in his address to the UN General Assembly, said that the world is becoming unhinged with geopolitical tensions rising and global challenges mounting. He thus called for a reformed UN Security Council to reflect the needs of today.
Just 9 days ago, many of the world's challenges coalesced in an awful hellscape. Thousands of people in Derna, Libya, lost their lives in epic, unprecedented flooding. They were victims many times over, victims of years of conflict, victims of climate chaos, victims of leaders, near and far, who failed to find a way to peace. The people of Derna lived and died in the epicenter of that indifference, as the skies unleashed 100 times the monthly rainfall in 24 hours, as dams broke after years of war and neglect, as everything they knew was wiped off the map. Even now, as we speak, bodies are washing ashore from the same Mediterranean Sea where billionaires sunbathe on their super yachts. Derna is a sad snapshot of the state of our world. The flood of inequity, of injustice, of inability to confront the challenges in our midst.
My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He gives us more on what's happening in the 78th UNGA session underway in New York, along with other stories making it to the headlines around the world. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Tanvi. Well, let's head straight to New York, where DD India's William Denslow is reporting from the UN headquarters. He sent us this update a little earlier from what we can expect from the speeches from the main member countries later today.
Ahead of the United Nations General Assembly, the UN's Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged world leaders coming here to New York to not just come to deliver lofty speeches, but to deliver action, tangible action, while they're here as well. So many of the crises around the world that we're currently seeing have been marked with inaction, malaise here at the United Nations. Antonio Guterres calling on the international community to bring compromise to this General Assembly to help break through some of those political deadlocks. Now, much of the attention at this year's UNGA is on who is not attending. Of course, of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, 4 of those world leaders will not be here. It's just the US President that will be making an address here at the UN General Assembly. Some analysts I've spoken to have said this is perhaps caused by some recent summit fatigue. Of course, we've had the recent BRICS summit, we've had the G20 in India recently, and some analysts also say that this points to the malaise in general that we've seen around the UN and its inability to be effective in helping solve global issues, be it climate change, be it making further progress on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, or conflicts around parts of the world too. One major headline, though, from a world leader that will be here in New York and will be here in New York speaking it in front of the international community for the first time, will be Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. We can expect him to make a huge appeal to the entirety of the international community to keep backing Kyiv in their war against Russia, urging the international community to abide by the UN Charter. William Denslow in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, ahead of his address to the United Nations General Assembly, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky met wounded Ukrainian soldiers at a New York City hospital on Monday. It's his first in-person visit to the Assembly since Russia launched its so-called special military operation against Ukraine. Zelensky is due to speak at the annual General Assembly of World Leaders later on Tuesday. Zelensky travelled straight from the airport to a hospital where Ukrainian soldiers are being treated.
I'm not sure that we will choose that format. I don't know how it will be. But yes, for us, it's very important that all our words, all our messages will be heard by our partners. And if in the United Nations there is a place for Russian terrorists, the question is not to me. I think it's a question to all the members of the United Nations.
Come back, of course, home. Thank you very much for your support. My appreciation. Thank you.
Well, Zelensky and the First Lady Olena Zelenska arrived in New York in the last 24 hours. Ukraine's leader intends to meet with his US counterpart, President Joe Biden. Russia's war in Ukraine will be on the agenda of the UN gathering, along with challenges facing the global south. DD India's Megumi Lim reports from Kiev in Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be addressing the United Nations General Assembly today, the first time he will be doing so in person since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He's hoping to shore up more support for aid for his country as the war continues. And he is also hoping to win over the support of developing countries, some of which have leaned towards Russia during the war. He will be making the case to world leaders that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a direct violation of the UN's most sacred principle of territorial integrity. This visit comes at a crucial and delicate time as the Ukrainian counteroffensive enters its 4th month. Some Western officials have voiced concern that the counteroffensive has not yielded significant results. President Zelensky, during his visit, is hoping to make a strong case that Ukraine can still make major gains on the battlefield, but also to express his deep gratitude and thanks to allies that have supported Ukraine throughout the war. Megumi Lim for DD India in Kyiv.
Well, Russia launched an air attack on the Ukrainian city of Lviv, killing 1 person. Local officials said that the blast also caused a major fire at an industrial warehouse. Russia has been targeting the industrial city in a bid to destroy Ukraine's crucial defense infrastructure. Moscow said that its forces attacked multiple Ukrainian targets, including an ammunition depot. while Kiev claimed that its troops destroyed 17 Russian missiles in the last 24 hours. Russia also claimed to have intercepted 27 drones and 5 rockets launched by high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, that have been supplied to Ukraine by the United States. Well, the US is urging its allied nations to send more air defense systems to Ukraine, as Russia claims that it's intercepted Ukrainian rockets supplied by Washington. Addressing leaders of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin urged leaders to push hard to provide more ground-based air defense to Ukraine. However, the group made no commitments on Kiev's demand for longer-range missiles. It was the 15th meeting of the group, which was established to support the Ukrainian Defense Forces after Russia's invasion in February 2022.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Air defense is saving lives. So I urge this group to continue to dig deep on ground-based air defense for Ukraine. And we must continue to push hard to provide Ukraine with the air defense systems and interceptors that it needs. And right now, in the heat of battle, we must also keep pushing to get Ukraine the ammunition that it needs to keep up the fight, including 155 millimeter ammunition.
Moving to the Indo-Pacific now, the United States, Japan and South Korea have raised concerns over growing ties between North Korea and Russia and their potential impact on the war in Ukraine. The Japanese Foreign Ministry said that the three nations will continue to monitor the growing cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. Just last week, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited Russia, where he met President Vladimir Putin. Kim also visited Russian military establishments. The West and its allies have accused North Korea of supplying weapons to Russia for use against Ukraine. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit China in October for talks, says a top Kremlin official, after China's foreign ministry, Wang Yi, held discussions with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. Secretary of Russia's Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, said they looked forward to a thorough bilateral discussion between President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Putin will also attend the third Belt and Road Forum in China. Patrushev added that the West's attempts to contain both Russia and China should deepen cooperation between the two powers. This is President Putin's first trip abroad since the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against him. He's accused of illegally deporting hundreds of children from Ukraine. Moscow has denied the allegations and said that the warrant was indicative of the West's hostilities towards Russia. Dasha Chernyshova reports from Moscow with more details on this story.
Well, as we have heard from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had extensive discussions with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Moscow. We understand that the sides have had a very detailed, constructive exchange of views when it comes to the international agenda, particularly the situation in Ukraine as well as the Korean Peninsula. We understand that Moscow and Beijing have said that they have the proximity of their positions when it comes to the U.S. actions in the international affairs, including those that have anti-Russia and anti-China nature. This is often referred as the U.S. is trying to contain both Russia and China. So with regard to that, we understand that these two parties are seeking to beef up their cooperation to provide the counterweight. But at the same time, we have seen a series of security consultations taking place in Moscow between the Chinese foreign minister as well as the Russian officials. Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of Russia's Security Council, did have the consultations with Wang Yi. He was talking about the joint counteraction to the interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states, of course, once again referring to the Western countries and particularly the United States. Moscow also said that it supports Beijing on the issue of Taiwan, Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, in which, according to the Russian officials, the West is trying to discredit China. So certainly we understand that the two sides are trying to beef up their cooperation and to send a very strong message to the world that these two countries are there together, shoulder to shoulder, to provide the counterweight and to make sure that the multipolarity that is now developing on the global arena is having a chance to have a solid ground.
Emirati astronaut Sultan Al Neyadi has returned to the UAE after a historic 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station. Al Neyadi was given a hero's welcome at Abu Dhabi International Airport, where he was greeted by the President and the Prime Minister, among other officials. Al Neyadi's mission of 186 days aboard the ISS was the longest by an Arab astronaut, and he made history during his time on the ISS by becoming the first Arab astronaut to perform a spacewalk. The World Health Organization has revised the Libya floods death toll to 3,958. Last week, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimated over 11,000 casualties. According to the WHO's latest update, over 9,000 people remain missing in the flood-hit country after remnants of Storm Daniel lashed Libya's northeast coast earlier this month. Officials have been using different methods to count the casualties, giving rise to varying figures.
There will be any communicable diseases spreading from the dead. Communicable diseases can start from the survivors if they don't have access to safe water, if they don't have access to safe food. We might start to see some cases of foodborne and waterborne diseases.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington, D.C. Back to you, Tanvi, in the studio.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Harper joining me from Washington, D.C. Still to come on DD India Global. Women's reservation bill introduced in Indian Parliament after decades. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls September 19th a historic day. An online platform, X, formerly Twitter, could introduce a monthly fee for all users. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. So a lot is happening in New York at the 78th UNGA session, where currently US President Joe Biden is addressing.
Leadership and careful effort, adversaries can become partners. Overwhelming challenges can be resolved, and deep wounds can heal. So let us never forget that. When we choose to stand together and recognize the common hopes that bind all humanity, we hold our hands in that power to bend that arc of history. My fellow leaders, we gather once more at an inflection point in world history, with the eyes of the world upon all of you, all of us. As President of the United States, I understand the duty my country has to lead in this critical moment, to work with countries in every region, linking them in common cause, to join together with partners who share a common vision of the future of the world, where our children do not go hungry and everyone has access to quality health care, where workers are empowered and our environment is protected, where entrepreneurs and innovators everywhere can access opportunity everywhere, where conflicts are resolved peacefully and countries can chart their own course. The United States seeks a more secure, more prosperous, more equitable world for all people, because we know our future is bound to yours. Let me repeat that again. We know our future is bound to yours. And no nation can meet the challenges of today alone. The generations that preceded us organized this body, the United Nations, and built international financial institutions and multilateral and regional bodies to help take on the challenges of their time. It wasn't always perfect. But working together, the world made some remarkable and undeniable progress that improved the lives of all people. We avoided the renewal of global conflict while lifting more than 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. We together expanded access to education for millions of children. We saved tens of millions of lives that would have otherwise been lost to preventable and treatable diseases like measles, malaria, tuberculosis. HIV/AIDS infections and deaths plummeted, in no small part because of PEPFAR's work in more than 55 countries, saving more than 25 million lives. It's a profound testament to what we can achieve when we act together, when we take on tough challenges, and an admonition for all of us to urgently accelerate our progress so that no one's left behind, because too many people are being left behind. The institutions we built together at the end of the Second World War are an enduring bedrock of our progress. And the United States is committed to sustaining them. And this year, we're proud to rejoin UNESCO. We also recognize that to meet the new challenges of our decades-old institutions and approaches, they must be updated to keep peace with the world. We have to bring in more leadership and capability that exists everywhere, especially from regions that had not always been fully included. We have to grapple with the challenges that are more connected and more complex. And we have to make sure we're delivering for people everywhere, not just somewhere, everywhere. Simply put, the 21st century results are badly needed. They're needed to move us along. That starts with the United Nations, starts right here in this room. In my address to this body last year, I announced the United States will support expanding the Security Council, increasing the number of permanent and non-permanent members. The United States has undertaken serious consultation with many member states and will continue to do our part to push more reform efforts forward, look for points of common ground, and make progress in the year ahead. We need to be able to break the gridlock that too often stymies progress and blocks consensus on the Council. We need more voices, more perspectives at the table. The United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. And we embrace nations stepping up to lead in new ways and to seek new breakthroughs on hard issues. For example, on Haiti, the Caribbean community is facilitating a dialogue among Haitian society. I thank President Ruto of Kenya. I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer. The United States is working across the board to make global institutions more responsive, more effective, and more inclusive. For example, we've taken significant steps to reform and scale up the the World Bank, expanding its financing to low and middle-income countries so it can help boost progress toward meeting the Sustainable Development Goals and better address interconnected challenges like climate change and fragility. Under the new president of the World Bank, change is already taking root. Last month, I asked the United States Congress for additional funds to expand World Bank financing by $25 billion. And at the G20, we rallied the major economies of the world to mobilize even more funding. Collectively, we can deliver a transformational boost to World Bank lending. And because the multilateral development banks are among the best tools we have for mobilizing transparent, high-quality investment in developing countries, reforming these institutions can be a game changer. Similarly, we proposed making sure developing countries have a strong voice and representation at the International Monetary Fund. We're going to continue our efforts to reform the World Trade Organization, and preserve competition, openness, transparency, and the rule of law, while at the same time equipping it to better tackle modern-day imperatives like driving the clean energy transition, protecting workers, promoting inclusive and sustainable growth. And this month, we strengthened the G20 as a vital forum, welcoming the African Union as a permanent member. By upgrading and strengthening our institutions, that's only half of the picture. We must also forge new partnerships, confront new challenges. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence hold both enormous potential and enormous peril. We need to be sure they are used as tools of opportunity, not as weapons of oppression. Together with leaders around the world, the United States is working to strengthen rules and policies so AI technologies are safe before they're released to the public. To make sure we govern this technology, not the other way around, having it govern us. And I'm committed to working through this institution and other international bodies and directly with leaders around the world, including our competitors, to ensure we harness the power of artificial intelligence for good while protecting our citizens from its most profound risk. It's going to take all of us. I've been working on this for a while, as many of you have. It's going to take all of us to get this right. In every region of the world, the United States is mobilizing strong alliances, versatile partnerships, common purpose, collective action to bring new approaches to our shared challenges. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we united 21 nations in support of the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection.
So U.S. President Joe Biden addressing the 78th session of the UN General Assembly. He says deep wounds can heal if the world is united. He also, along the lines of UN Chief Antonio Guterres, rooted for an expanded UN Security Council. He said that more permanent members would be welcomed. He also hinted at the G20, where recently in New Delhi, under India's G20 presidency, African Union was made a permanent member of the G20 grouping. He said that US has the duty to lead in this time of crises, and he hopes that we all will come together and deliver for people everywhere. This address is continuing, but as we wrap up DD India Global now, let's talk about the Indian festival of Ganeshotsav, which has begun with much pomp and splendor today. This festival is observed mostly in the western Indian state of Maharashtra, along with the whole of country, but it's especially observed with grand celebrations in Maharashtra. So devotees are looking forward to this colorful 10-day festivities, which begin today and will end on 28th of September. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.